Hi everyone, Maull here for Windhorse Seminars. I've been wanting to initiate a conversation about resilience for some time now. I think it's safe to say that in the very challenging times in which we're living, resilience is really no longer a luxury. It's becoming essential, critical to our very survival. Similarly to something that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has often been quoted as saying. Most of you may be familiar with the Dalai Lama, who's the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people, but has also become a global leader for peace and nonviolence. And he's often been quoted as saying that compassion is not a luxury, that it's actually critical to our very survival. And I believe that is absolutely true in this highly complex, interdependent world in which we live today. However, I would say that resilience is even more foundational, because in order for us to respond with our innate predilection towards or capacities for compassion, kindness, altruistic behaviors, we need to be in a resilient place. It really depends on our moment-to-moment levels of resilience. When we're not resilient, we very often are going to get pushed into fear and survival-based behaviors rather than being able to access our best self, our more compassionate, kind, altruistic self. So I think it really is safe to say that resilience is not a luxury, that it's really becoming critical to our very survival. And, the world that we're in today, just hyper complexity at all levels. We have population it's questionable whether the Earth can really sustain the levels of population we have now, and it's increasing rapidly. We have what many people consider a climate emergency already, the phenomenon of global climate change and the impact that that's very likely to have on us very soon, leading to all kinds of social, economic, political disruption, real dangers. And in fact, that's already impacting many people, as we saw, and many beings, as we saw with the fires in Australia earlier. So this is already something that's here. Artificial intelligence is maybe going to be able to help us manage some of this hypercomplexity, but it also contributes to the hypercomplexity. And it may put a lot of people out of work as well. So our society is just changing so rapidly as technology, the innovations in technology to develop at an ever-increasing rate. And already our developments in technology and really the hypercomplexity that we're experiencing globally has outpaced our own the own development, our own human development in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of even cognitive capacities, and our ability to really manage all this, and certainly in terms of our collective moral compass. There are just so many complex questions today that we've never really done the work to figure out what is an ethical way of living in the world today, given all of these issues. The issues of privacy obviously are, front and center, and very well should be with all the technology that we deal with today. And we all know that we've handed over a lot of our privacy in exchange for the convenience of using a lot of these technologies. Then on top of that, currently we're experiencing this outbreak and epidemic and potential pandemic of the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 disease. So these are very, very challenging times. And I would suspect, actually, just when you heard me mention coronavirus or COVID-19, that actually triggered your amygdala, the warning bells in our limbic brain that trigger us of any kind of warning, discomfort, danger, threat. And those are getting triggered all the time in modern society. That was already happening, has been happening for decades and decades, that we live in this modern world with a lot of noise, a lot of stressors, and as Herbert Benson said back in the 70s, we've lost that natural relaxation response. Other animals, you probably experience this with your dog or cat at home if you have pets, can just turn it on and turn it off. The dog can go into alarm barking and then drop right down into nap time, right, with a nice belly breathing, belly going in and out. So they can turn it on and off, and we've lost the ability, most of us, to turn off the stress response and to re-engage the relaxation response. So we really need to relearn that. Unfortunately, there's a tremendous emphasis on body-mind disciplines for stress management and for relearning the relaxation response. Today, however, there are huge portions of our society that really isn't yet reaching. And now, even those of us who have really engage in very active stress management and maybe we're involved in physical disciplines like yoga or Tai Chi or Keto or other types of contemplative physical disciplines. Maybe we exercise regularly. Maybe we're solid meditation practitioners. We practice a half hour, an hour a day. Maybe we do retreats on a yearly basis. We are still very, very challenged. I know I am with everything that's going on. So every time you're in the newspaper or on the news, you're just hearing the word or reading the word novel coronavirus or COVID-19, your amygdala are getting triggered and we're going into fight or flight into survival mode. And the back of your brain is unconsciously below your level of awareness going, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. That's just the human condition. That's the way we're set up. You may have heard of something called the negativity bias. This was named by some researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's the fact that we know neurobiologically from current neuroscience that our brain is set up to pay much more attention to any kind of threat, danger, discomfort, really anything novel, anything we're not familiar with. It pays much more attention to that than anything else. So as Rick Hansen has euphemistically described it, our brain is set up to act like Velcro for negativity and like Teflon for positivity. Actually, positive experiences don't even go into long-term memory unless we hold them in short-term memory, a different set of neural networks in the brain for, the science says, 12 to 20 seconds. Whereas negative experiences of any kind go right into long-term memory. And we remember these things with great detailed vividness. Why? Because what's job one for any species? Survival, right? So what are we going to pay most attention to? Threat. So it makes sense. The problem is that, as you can see from this idea of the negativity bias, our long-term memory is just full of negativity, danger, and threat. So we're walking around all day long with our brain thinking, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, when in fact, most of the time, our life is not at risk. So that's all being exacerbated by all the complexities we're dealing with today. We're in an environment where there's tremendous political uncertainty, tremendous political divisiveness, tremendous economic uncertainty, and increasing gaps, huge gaps, really, I would say obscene gaps between the rich and the poor, or between most of us and the super rich. So we're dealing with all of these things and global insecurities. When was the last time someone even thought about the threat of nuclear war or of nuclear weapons falling into the hands of bad actors, right? That's very much out there, but we have other things on our radar screen like the coronavirus. And one of the disturbing things for me is, and we all hope this coronavirus outbreak and epidemic is going to pass through and it'll end at some point. And of course, there could be another one following it, but that we'll get a break from that and we can return to focusing on other matters. But clearly that is the critical focus right now. But it's pushed climate change and the climate emergency kind of off the main radar screen. And we need to be acting on climate change right now, and it's an existential threat. So I hope I've made a convincing argument that we're living in really challenging times. And I think maybe people have always said that about the times they live in, but these really are challenging times full of so much uncertainty. And the consequences are existential, and that's never been the case before. Our very life on this planet, the survivability of human beings on this planet has never really been threatened in the way that it is now, aside from the possibility of nuclear warfare, which has been around for a while, as we all know. But, climate change is something that we're hearing could already be beyond our control. So these are tough times, very uncertain times. And if we're going to have any chance to really be in a responsive relationship to the challenges we face day in and day out, it all depends on our resilience. So that's why I wanted to really initiate this conversation about resilience and about how we can become more resilient. So when we talk about resilience, and just as an aside here, I've been training business leaders, prisoners, and in resilience for a long time. And for the last 11 years, I've been training correctional officers and probation and parole officers, and more recently, law enforcement. We did a resilience training with the U.S. Border Patrol down on the border of California and Mexico last summer. So I've been doing this work of resilience training, and we have a model through the nonprofit that I founded we call mindfulness-based wellness and resiliency. So this is something I focus on a lot. And actually, for doing my doctorate a few years ago, I read all the scientific literature in the peer-reviewed journals, all the neurobiological literature and all the psychosocial literature on mindfulness, on well-being, and on resilience. So this is something that I've dug into a bit here. And but in simple terms, when we talk about resilience, we're really talking about it in four major domains of our life, or aspects of our being in our life. So that's physical resilience. So how can we become more physically fit and resilient? Then mental resilience. How do we become more mentally fit and resilient? Emotional resilience, spiritual resilience, right? So what are some of the strategies to become more physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually fit and resilient? And what do we mean by resilience to begin with? We're all familiar with the term, and often we make that comparison or use the analogy of a rubber band. It's that ability for something to bounce back. So we stretch the rubber band, it bounces back, right? If it's an old rubber band, it's losing its stretch, it's losing its resilience, right? So an old rubber band is less resilient, right? So it's that ability to bounce back from challenging physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual challenges and circumstances. For example, if I were to start jogging and get my heart rate up over 100, let's say, and then stop, how long would it take for my heart rate to come back to a normal baseline for me, which might be maybe 65 beats a minute, something like that. And the length of that time, the shorter it is, the more physically fit and resilient I am, at least around that measure, right? So it's our ability to bounce back, and how quickly do we recover and bounce back from physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual challenges, right? So there are a lot of common sense things we can do to become more resilient, and they're all enhanced by mindfulness. So towards the end of this video, I'm going to lead us in a mindfulness exercise, approaching mindfulness meditation in a way that really ramps up the resilience enhancement factor. Now, all mindfulness practice is going to enhance our resilience. However, doing it in the way I've been working with, especially for the last 2 decades, in a very deeply embodied way, really activating our capacity for what's called interoceptive awareness, really enhances the resilience-building impact of mindfulness and awareness meditation practices. So we'll do that in just a minute. But to begin with, I'd like to just mention some common sense things. So when we talk about physical resilience, we're talking about all the things that help us to become more physically fit, healthy, greater physical well-being, right? So obviously diet, eating, a healthy diet of mostly whole foods as much as possible, a plant-based diet. I'm not saying we all have to become vegetarians or vegans, but really minimizing our consumption of various meats and animal products, shifting to a more plant-based diet, organic if we're able to, and I realize there's some privilege in our ability to be able to access organic products. Nonetheless, the more we all create the demand for it, the more, as we've already seen, it's shifting the landscape where most supermarkets today have some organic products available. So eating the best things we can, hormone-free, if we're going to eat animal products, grass-fed, and so forth. So really good diet, and also lowering our overall calorie intake. There's a lot of science that says that calorie restriction leads to longevity. So that's the diet piece, right? And then hydration and proper breathing. Now, what do our cells most need, really at the cellular level to survive and thrive? Well, I just mentioned nutrition, right? So our nutrition gets converted into glucose and energy that goes to the cells. What are the other two things that the cells need? The cells need oxygen and they need H2O, water. Most of us do not drink enough water. I've got my water right here. We've all heard that we're supposed to drink so many ounces of water per our body weight. Most of us don't drink enough water. And many of us don't breathe properly. Many of us, a stress response is to become a chest breather. So many of us have become chest breathers. And the proper way to breathe is diaphragmatically with the belly. We call it belly breathing because the belly goes in and out, but what's really happening is the diaphragm muscle is contracting, which creates a vacuum in the lungs, draws the air in, and when it contracts, it pushes down. All of our major organs have nowhere to go but out, and so the belly rises. And then when we relax the diaphragm muscle, it releases the air from the lungs and the belly falls down to its normal position. So sometimes we call it belly breathing, but more properly, it's known as diaphragmatic breathing. And what's so important about that? Well, diaphragmatic breathing gets the breath down into the lungs where the blood-oxygen exchange actually happens through the aoli and the villi in the lower part of the lungs, and it keeps the breath there long enough so that we actually get the oxygen we need into the bloodstream. When we do shallow chest breathing, we're not getting it fully into the lungs and we're not holding it in the lungs long enough. I'm going to introduce a simple breathing exercise in a minute along with the meditation that's also a resilience building tool and helps us return to healthy breathing. So proper nutrition, proper hydration, breathing properly, and of course we all know about exercise. And just even making some small incremental improvements in your exercise, walking a mile a day if you can. You know, we all hear about the 10,000 steps. That can be pretty hard to get to, and I track it myself. And you know, except when I'm traveling, doing a lot of walking in foreign cities, or when I happen to be at a time of year when I'm doing a lot of hikes, I find it pretty tough to get to the 10,000, but I try to get over 5 at least. But I work out every day. You know, I do some exercise every day. I have a whole exercise stretching routine I do first thing in the morning when I get out of bed, and then I have some other exercises that I do often throughout the day. So exercise, critically important. So diet, proper hydration, proper breathing, exercise, and then finally, getting enough rest. So getting the sleep we need, 7 hours minimum, 8 hours is ideal. There's all kinds of negative impacts of not sleeping enough and not sleeping well enough. And of course, all the things we can do to become more resilient, we're going to be talking about, will help us sleep better as well. So if we have problems sleeping, it's usually a stress response. And if we can increase our resilience and improve our stress management tools and practices, we'll likely be able to sleep better and benefit from getting enough sleep. And then just the last thing in this area of physical resilience is just moderation around things that we know are hard on the body. Caffeine, alcohol, certainly I hope very few of you, if any of you, are smoking cigarettes and doing nicotine anymore. But you know, nicotine is one just to let go of altogether. But moderation around alcohol, caffeine, and certainly sugar. Sugar is another good one to let go of altogether if you can, or really, really minimize. These things are hard on the body, right? So then mental resilience. Mental resilience really comes down to how we take care of our brain. Now, the good news is everything that's good for the body is good for the brain, right? So everything we just talked about will help you have a healthy brain. And the brain, like any other part of our body, if you don't use it, you start to lose it, right? So we need to use our brain and challenge our brain. So we've all probably heard things like doing crossword puzzles. Some people do Sudoku, or learning a new language. You know, if we learn a new language, especially one that has a distinctly different grammatical structure from English, we have to create a whole new set of neural pathways in the brain to be able to speak that language. And creating new neural pathways in the brain causes the brain to grow and thrive, right? So challenging our brain by continually learning new things, right? Even travel can be healthy for the brain. Now, any way in which we challenge the brain is going to help the brain to thrive. And we now know that the brain can thrive throughout the lifespan and continue to increase in its level of complexity and integration and its capacity for thriving and really optimal performance throughout the lifespan into our 90s and perhaps beyond for some of us who maybe become centenarians. Right? So we used to think that, you know, the brain you got by the time you're an adult is the brain you're stuck with, and if anything, it diminishes over time. We now know from the phenomenon known as neuroplasticity that the brain is continually restructuring itself based on what we expose it to, and that it can thrive throughout the lifespan if we take care of it and use it. Now, that plasticity that allows the brain to change in positive ways is enhanced by basic mindfulness practice, and it's also enhanced by exercise. Okay, so that's mental fitness and resilience. Emotional fitness and resilience, for me, has a lot to do with our ability to express our emotions in healthy ways, to actually feel our emotions without, we don't want to repress our emotions, which a lot of us do. We also don't want to be hijacked by our emotions, which happens to us a lot. So that ability to be with our emotions in a healthy way, and then in appropriate times, express them with others. So basic mindfulness training really helps us be with the emotional part of our being in a healthy way, in a conscious way, in a mindful way. And then the ability to really share our feelings with others in healthy ways, reasonable ways, really comes down to the quality of our relationships. So really putting energy into the quality of our relationships and creating our own support circles. So our spouses, our children, our parents, our closest friends, work colleagues, mentors. Very helpful to have, someone that we can go to, maybe that's not a family person, that we can go to, whether it's a spiritual director or a counselor or a coach or a mentor or a counselor of some kind, that we can go to and really feel free to really talk about what's going on with us. So I think having a healthy relationship with our own emotional life, and then having relationships where we can be honest, open, and real, genuine about what we are experiencing emotionally in appropriate ways, that's the key for me to emotional resilience. And then finally, we have spiritual fitness, spiritual resilience. So we often associate the idea of spirituality with religion, and it certainly is connected to religion, and all the world's religions, the major ones and some of the not as well-known ones or not as large ones, have all been wonderful ways of expressing and accessing the spiritual dimension. However, I would say, in the clinical literature, would describe the spiritual dimension as being larger than that the religious expression is a subset of a larger spiritual dimension. And when we talk about spiritual well-being, spiritual health, we're talking about a felt sense of connectedness intrapersonally with ourselves, that we feel connected, we feel a sense of wholeness, integration, which is the opposite of feeling, a sense of alienation or despair. So we feel that connection with ourselves. We feel connection with others, interpersonal connection, and that's the quality of the relationships I was just mentioning. And then we have a sense of connectedness with some greater dimension that gives our life meaning and purpose. So for some of us, that could be the God of our understanding. It could be nature. It could be the Dharma, the Tao, whatever it is for us. But it's some greater dimension beyond the self that we feel connected with, and that gives our life meaning and purpose. And we call that transpersonal connectedness. So that felt sense of connectedness intrapersonally within ourselves, interpersonally with others, and transpersonally with some greater dimension that gives our life meaning and purpose. And then the other aspect of spiritual health and well-being is just that, meaning and purpose. Having a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. And when we lose that, we start to feel a sense of meaninglessness, purposelessness, emptiness, alienation, and so forth. And that's called spiritual distress. So how do we create meaning and purpose in our life? Well, that sense of connectedness has a lot to do with it, but it's also a lot of activities that we engage in. So those may be religious activities, religious fellowship, and so forth, engaging in rites and rituals of our faith, or it might be getting out in nature and experiencing the wonders of the natural world. It could be engaging in community service or being involved in other social organizations. There can be lots of ways that we engage in life that give us a sense of meaning and purpose. For many of us, our profession and our work life is one source of meaning and purpose. So it's all those different ways that we engage with life that give ourselves a sense of meaning and purpose. And the deeper we can make that, the more unconditional we can make that. Right? So if we have a sense of meaning and purpose and connectedness where I'm really connected with my own body, heart, and mind, and I really feel connected to this earth and to the cosmos and the natural world, that becomes fairly unconditional. Our sense of meaning and purpose that can be tied to other, which are wonderful ways to connect with meaning and purpose, but they may be more relative or conditional, and they may be destabilized by something that happens to us, maybe an illness or some kind of social breakdown, right? So we can find meaning and purpose in all different ways, and they're all wonderful. And if we can anchor our meaning and purpose in some of the more unconditional aspects of our own being and our own life, that's the most dependable way, I suppose, to maintain that sense of meaning and purpose in our life and thus our spiritual health and well-being. So these are the dimensions. Now, I just want to offer a couple of simple practices here, okay? So one I'm going to offer is something that can help us self-regulate. It's a very simple practice called straw breathing. And it's called straw breathing because you can do it with a straw, but you don't have to. Straw breathing, we breathe in through the nose with our mouth closed, like that, and then we breathe out through pursed lips, as if blowing through a straw or as if whistling. Now, if we want to use a straw, we can have a whole straw or a half a straw. We breathe in through the nose, then we place the straw on our lips, blow out through the straw. Now, it takes more effort to blow through a straw, and there's lots of things that go on there. One is that it helps us become diaphragmatic breathers again, but there's also things that happen with our nitrous dioxide level and so forth. You can use your search engine to do some research around straw breathing. It's well known. You can investigate it yourself. But the most important thing is that what straw breathing does is it directly engages the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, which is the relaxation response. You know, our autonomic nervous system, which operates all the complex system of our body, which operate without us having to consciously decide to have all these different complex things happen, has two branches. One is like the accelerator, it's the stress response. One is kind of like the brake, it's the relaxation response. They're both going on all the time. They're connected with the in-breath and the out-breath. When we breathe in, stress response, heart accelerates a little bit. That's the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system being engaged. When we breathe out, parasympathetic branch response, or the relaxation response, and the heart decelerates slightly, which is why with good stress function, we have what's called heart rate variability. The heart rate is constantly going up and down a little bit. When we're chest breathers, we're not getting enough out breath, the heart rate tends to flatten out and you lose that good heart rate variability. So we're going to do straw breathing here for just a minute, and it's very simple to learn it. You might want to close your eyes to try it to begin with, but you can do it anytime, anywhere. I do it driving all the time. I do a lot of drives to the airport, and some of them are white-knuckle drives in bad weather, and I do the straw breathing the whole time, all the way through security, all the way till I get to the gate, and I can relax knowing I'm going to make my flight. Okay? So we breathe in through the nose, out through pursed lips, in through the nose, out through pursed lips, in through the nose, out through pursed lips. Okay, that's straw breathing. It's that simple, except for one more factor. We're going to count so that we can ensure the out-breath is twice as long or nearly twice as long as the in-breath. So we might be breathing in a 4 count, something like this. In, 2, 3, 4, and then out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you get the idea. So let's just do this. We're just going to do this for about 30 seconds, just so you get a feel for it. Okay, you get the idea? So I would encourage you to begin working with that. If you do it for 2 or 3 minutes, I'm sure you'll begin to feel your whole physiology shift. You'll feel yourself calm down. You'll have a palpable feeling of the relaxation response kicking in, the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And you can do this anytime, anywhere, and it puts you in charge of your own nervous system, your own autonomic nervous system, your own physiology, rather than having the world around you in charge of it. Now, if you actually needed to kick in the stress response and kind of wake yourself up, you could do what's called fire breathing in the Kundalini yoga tradition, where you breathe abdominally, quick little sips like that. Now, you don't want to get carried away with that. It can be a little destabilizing. But you do it a little bit, wakes up your nervous system. So that's like the accelerator for your autonomic nervous system, and the straw breathing is like the brake. So having those two simple tools puts you in charge of your own physiology. And if we don't take ownership for our own physiology, then guess who's in charge? Everyone else, the world around us. And we live in the interface between our childhood conditioning, which we had nothing to say about, all that complex programming that's in our brain already, and the world around us. And sometimes, that's not such a great ride. So why not get back in the driver's seat of our own life and take charge of our own physiology? If we can manage our own physiology, then we can regulate our own emotions and we can regulate our own behaviors, and thus we're in the driver's seat of our own life. And the more confidence we have around that, the more we begin to feel deeply resilient and confident that we can handle all kinds of situations from our best self, from our most responsive, compassionate, altruistic self. Okay, so that's straw breathing. Then I'd like to lead just a very brief meditation and then finish it off with something that I call safe, resourced, and connected. Safe, resourced, and connected. It's a contemplative exercise meant to deal with that negativity bias that I spoke about before. And it's a resilience building exercise that I adapted with permission from my friend Rick Hanson's work. So we're going to do a little mindfulness practice, just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go into safe, resourced, and connected. So if you would, in whatever kind of seating arrangement you have, or even if you're standing, whatever your situation is, just try to find a stable posture. If possible, have it be relatively erect and uplifted. And you may want to lower your gaze for this, or you can close your eyes, whatever you find most comfortable. And just begin, as you're ready, bringing your attention to your body. And by body, I mean the actual tactile physical sensations that make up the experience we call body. Body itself is just a concept, and we actually do have a conceptual body made up of all our body images and memory and thoughts. So we want to penetrate beneath that into the actual tactile physical sensations. You might want to begin, since our attention is often up in the head area, since we're very auditorially and visually oriented, and all our, we relate with our thoughts being up there somewhere. So just letting your attention drop down from the head, through the neck, through the shoulders, the upper back, the chest, down through the torso, through the waist, hips and buttocks, upper legs, lower legs, and all the way down to the soles of the feet. Or if you like, you could begin with whatever sensations you find most predominant, perhaps the contact points between your body and the chair or your feet in the ground. And then gradually extend your awareness throughout the body. To begin with, paying attention to all those sensations we can notice and feel on the surface of our skin from head to toe, which is one large, very vast sensory organ. And of course, if your mind begins to wander, just gently bringing it back. And if it wanders again, gently bringing it back again. No self-criticism. The mind wanders. That's what it does. We just bring it back again and again. And each time we come back, dropping further into the body with a gentle commitment to make an effort to just be there with our physical experience moment to moment. We could bring our attention to the breath with the passage of air across the nostrils and parted lips. And then as you're ready, beginning to explore all the internal sensations as well, the inner physical landscape of the body, activating the innate capacity we have called interoceptive awareness, or just interoception, which is the body's capacity to feel itself from the inside out. Now, this is nothing mysterious. We use it all the time. It's how we're aware of when we're hungry or thirsty, tired, when we need to use the restroom, Certainly if we're experiencing some muscle pain or we have a headache and any kind of discomfort, the body communicating to us from the inside out. That's what we mean by interoception or interoceptive awareness. We're generally only aware of it, though, when we experience some kind of discomfort. However, with practice, we can develop an abiding awareness of the inner landscape of the body all the way down to the bones. And the bones themselves are sensory. Our entire body is living tissue, all connected to the nervous system, all sensory. So bringing the mind again and again to the body and exploring this vast landscape of actual tactile physical sensations, the external sensations on the surface of the skin, and very importantly, all of the internal sensations. The overall weight and mass of the muscles and bones, sensations of relaxation or tension, aliveness or numbness, the presence of any aches or pains or areas of discomfort. The overall flow of nervous energy in the body, or even what is sometimes described as life force energy, like in the Asian martial arts disciplines, chi or ki, or in yoga, what is called prana. The more we're able to develop a deeply felt presence of the body, this anchors us in nowness, in the present moment. It makes it easier to do our mindfulness practice. Makes it a little harder for the mind to wander, easier to bring it back. And it increases our resilience. Increases, current neuroscience shows that increases in interoceptive awareness increase our capacity for emotion regulation and deepen our resilience. There's an abiding aliveness that you can tap into, and with practice, once you really tap into it, it's kind of there in the background all the time, supporting us in a very nurturing way, a very stabilizing way that over time continually increases our resilience. Okay, so within this foundation of mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breathing, that entire flow of the breath, all the different sensations we feel with the breath flowing in and out, and the entire landscape of the physical body, external and internal sensations, especially the internal sensations. I'd like you to begin doing 3 contemplations. They're progressive, one builds on the other, so I'll guide you through them. And again, you may want to close your eyes for this to really kind of go inside and feel your way into this. But eventually you could do it anytime, anywhere, with the eyes open, the gaze lowered, or with your eyes closed, whatever works for you. So the first contemplation is, right here, right now, I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Now I'm assuming that you're in a relatively safe space where you are. And contemplating something like safety could bring up memories of times when you didn't feel safe. It could be triggering in some way. So allow all that to just come and go as it will, and just keep bringing yourself back to the fact that right here, right now, at least for a moment here, I am safe. I'm relatively safe. And of course, it's ideal to do this practice someplace where you do feel safe. But we train correctional officers to do this even in places where they don't feel that safe, but they can find their way into their best self by taking a moment to breathe and realizing, well, at least for this minute, I'm okay. So continually reflecting, right here, right now, I'm safe. We're speaking to the reptilian brain that otherwise is walking around all day telling us, I'm going to die. So right here, right now, I'm safe. So repeating a phrase to yourself so you begin to actually feel that in your nervous system, and you're breathing it into the nervous system, really all the way down to the marrow of the bones. Right here, right now, I'm safe. And then the second contemplation building on that is right here, right now, I'm resourced. I'm resourced. My basic needs are met. Food, warmth, shelter. My basic needs are met. So just continually repeat a phrase like, right here, right now, I'm resourced, until you feel that quality of being resourced, which is the opposite of lack, right? And again, that could bring up fears or memories of not being resourced, and you're going to let all that come and go. We're not resisting anything here, but just keep guiding yourself back to the fact that right here, right now, at least for this moment, you are resourced. So just again and again, right here, right now, I am resourced. And breathing that into our nervous system and brain, all the way down to the marrow of the bones. Right here, right now, I'm resourced, safe and resourced. And then finally, right here, right now, I'm connected. Right here, right now, I'm connected. I have people in my life. So bring to mind your loved ones, your close friends, your family members, and feel that sense of being connected to them. Really see them in your mind's eye and feel that quality of connection. There are people that have your back. You have their back. And of course, we all have issues from time to time in our relationships. None of it's perfect, but we are connected. So right here, right now, I am connected. I am connected. So feel that quality of being connected, which is the opposite of feeling isolated, alienated, and so forth. Right here, right now, I am connected. So breathing that into the nervous system and the brain, again, all the way down to the marrow of the bones. Right here, right now, I'm connected. Safe, resourced, and connected. Safe, resourced, and connected. So let's finish our practice off here with some straw breathing and just really taking these qualities of being safe, resourced, and connected deeply into our nervous system and body. So maybe take 3 long breaths in through the nose and then out through pursed lips. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm resourced. Right here, right now, I'm connected. Safe, resourced, and connected. Okay, well, I hope this has stimulated your thinking about how you can become more resilient and maybe have this conversation with your family members, with your children, with your spouse. This is a time, especially with the current coronavirus epidemic, our lives are going to be disrupted for most of us, maybe all of us. Our lives may be seriously disrupted in the coming weeks and for a period of time, maybe for several months. And our ability to rise to the occasion and to meet that with any level of equanimity, spaciousness, really ability to be our best responsive, compassionate self is really going to depend on how resilient we are. And, another aspect of the times we're going through is that when we're not resilient, of course, it's very hard to respond from our best self. We're much more triggerable. I mean, we all know this. Anytime, we're not eating well, we're not sleeping well, maybe too much caffeine, too much sugar, of course, we're more irritable and more triggerable. We all have had this experience. We know this. When we're taking good care of ourselves, sleeping well, and so forth, we're less triggerable, right? We have more resilience, right? This is common sense. So the other thing about this, though, is there are leaders in the world. I use leaders, with hesitation, but there are powerful figures in the world that will want to manipulate us around our fears. And when we're less resilient, we're more vulnerable to being manipulated by these demagogues. So I think it's just so important that we become resilient individuals, and together we co-create resilient families, communities, and a more resilient society. So I really appreciate you paying attention to this video, and I encourage you to continue this conversation with your family members and your friends about how we can all become more resilient together. Thank you.